Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Soul Land 2 Peerless Tang Men based on novel. So let's start. Nan Qiuqiu nodded and said, "It's fine. I've already told my mother, and she said that cultivation is more important, and we can go at any time whenever Yuhao is free. My mother returned to our sect about half a month ago. I've heard that Dragon City, where the Earth Dragon sect is located, has been conquered by the Sun Moon Empire, and she wants to go back to deal with some administrative matters. She will withdraw all of the sect's resources this time and transfer them to Shrek." Huo Yuhao was momentarily shocked when he heard that the Sun Moon Empire had conquered Dragon City. He turned towards Bei Bei and asked, "How is the war going, eldest senior brother?" 1 month was quite a long time, and their situation could change in the blink of an eye. Bei Bei said, "Don't worry, little junior brother. The situation is considered relatively stable. Ever since you guys helped the Star Luo Empire break through the Mingdo mountain range's defensive perimeter, the Star Luo Empire has unleashed an assault on all fronts against the Sun Moon Empire's territory. Even though their forward momentum isn't too quick, they've managed to disturb the Sun Moon Empire, so that they have no choice but to turn back their soldiers to reinforce their own territory. The pressure on the Heavenly Soul Empire has been reduced. The Heavenly Soul Empire and the Doling Empire's reinforcements have rendezvoused, and they are trying their best to resist the Sun Moon Empire's pressure. Even though the Sun Moon Empire is still conquering more and more land, their speed has been considerably slowed. This has given us some time." Huo Yuhao heaved a sigh of relief when he heard Bei Bei's words. It seemed like the Star Luo Empire had been reasonably effective. Ultimate Doluo were indeed powerful, but the death god Doluo couldn't rely on her own strength to cover the entire battlefield. Before they left back then, the White Tiger Duke had already decided on their direction to divide and conquer, so that they could target the locations where the Sun Moon Empire lacked soldiers, and hence destroy all their legions in those areas. They harassed the Sun Moon Empire over large areas with small teams. Yi Shishure's individual strength was very powerful, but she couldn't cover every single spot. This should be the battle strategy that was effective in the end. The White Tiger Duke wasn't inferior to any of the Sun Moon Empire's commanders in terms of strategy and tactics. Bei Bei said, "Even though you are unlikely to run into the Sun Moon Empire's main forces on your journey, you guys still have to be careful. You have to help the Earth Dragon sect's leader return to Shrek City while you explore their mysterious areas. Qiuqiu, don't be unreasonable or playful with Huo Yuhao, do you understand? Otherwise, I will confine you when you return." Nan Qiuqiu stuck out her tongue and said, "Understood, eldest senior brother. Can you not see how obedient and lovable I am right now?" Bei Bei stared at her as she attempted to act like she was aggrieved. He couldn't help but laugh as he said, "You? Obedient and lovable. Heaven pity and protect us. All right, go and pack up, and then you can leave." Nan Qiuqiu turned and darted away excitedly. She had been looking forward to going out to play for a long time. Huo Yuhao chose to stay behind. He could tell from Bei Bei's eyes that his eldest senior brother had something to say to him. "Yuhao, help me look for the Blue Silver Emperor when you go to the Heavenly Soul Empire if it's possible." His eyes were full of lament and frustration when he said those words. He knew that their chances of finding the Blue Silver Emperor were very slim. In the end, the Great Star Do Forest was already very helpful, but they still hadn't discovered anything yet. All they did was provide a lead that a certain soul beast had seen the Blue Silver Emperor within the Heavenly Soul Empire, and this was the reason why Bei Bei had brought it up to Huo Yuhao. Huo Yuhao nodded and said, "Definitely. Do you have solid leads regarding the Blue Silver Emperor, eldest senior brother?" Bei Bei said, "I don't have any proper leads. Someone from the Great Star Do Forest mentioned some soul beasts have seen the Blue Silver Emperor in the Heavenly Soul Empire, but we don't have any precise leads." "Oh, yes, if you have time, you can visit the Setting Sun Forest. I have kept Big Fur and Little Fur there, and it's been some time. I wonder how they're like." Big Fur and Little Fur were the 2 dark golden terraclaw bears that Huo Yuhao and Wang Chua had rescued from evil soul masters a long time ago. They had been fed over the past few years, and were a lot larger than before. Bei had left them in the setting sun forest back then, before he returned to the Tang sect to deal with administrative matters. All right, I'll take a look, Huo Yuhao acknowledged. He couldn't help but think about Wang Qiu'er, who had sacrificed herself for him, when he thought of Big Fur and Little Fur. Wang Qiu'er was with him when they had rescued Big Fur and Little Fur. Bei glanced at Huo Yuhao and said, "Right, Yuhao. I heard that Tang Wutong has been visiting you very often when you were meditating. Have you seen her? She even found an excuse to come to the Tang sect not long ago to look for you." Huo Yuhao was momentarily stunned, and the image of Tang Wutong dashing away surfaced in his head. He nodded and said, "I've met her already." Bei contemplated for a moment. He wanted to say something and seemed very hesitant, but he kept his words to himself in the end. "All right, little junior. Be careful on the road, and return as quickly as possible. If you can't find the Blue Silver Emperor, then forget it. As for Big Fur and Little Fur, you have to tell them not to destroy the immortal herbs around the Icefire Yin-Yang well." Huo Yuhao nodded. He was all alone in this world, so there was nothing much for him to pack. He took a shower and changed into some clean clothes before he packed a few extra sets of clean clothes, some rations and some water. He bid his farewells to his companions, and he went to see Xianzuan at night. Huo Yuhao and Nan Qiuqiu departed the Tang sect in the morning on the next day, and they went straight toward the Heavenly Soul Empire. Shrek Academy was positioned at the border between all three empires. They were originally within the Heavenly Soul Empire's borders, while Dragon City, which was where the Earth Dragon sect was located, was in the Heavenly Soul Empire's northeastern regions. They just had to proceed north from Shrek City to reach Dragon City. Huo Yuhao and Nan Qiuqiu activated their respective flying-type soul tools as they left Shrek City, before they rose into the sky and traveled towards the north. Both of them felt very liberated as they left the city. The endless skies were just so clean, and everything flashed by past beneath them. Nan Qiuqiu was flying beside Huo Yuhao, and for some reason, she felt as if there was something different about him. He appeared a little more transcendent than before, of course. That was a good feeling, but Nan Qiuqiu's heart sunk into a dilemma once again, since she had already given up on her feelings toward him. Can this guy stop being so outstanding? Yi Gai had gone into closed-door cultivation since they returned the last time, and she wasn't done yet. Nan Qiuqiu knew that she wanted to keep herself from seeing Huo Yuhao as much as possible so that he couldn't pull her heart along. Nan Qiuqiu also wanted to go into closed-door cultivation, but she couldn't stand all that loneliness. Furthermore, she still had to take Huo Yuhao to the Earth Dragon sect. She was still hoping deep within her heart that something would happen between them during their expedition. "Hey! Why are you so taciturn?" Nan Qiuqiu couldn't control herself anymore after flying for more than an hour. Huo Yuhao still seemed very casual and elegant as he flew in the sky, and he didn't make a sound. He turned towards her confusedly and said, "Why? What do you want to talk about? Don't you think the wind is very strong? Talking will waste soul power." Nan Qiuqiu was infuriated. "Then so be it. We should still chat, it'll be so boring otherwise." Huo Yuhao answered, "All right, let's chat." "About what?" Nan Qiuqiu was momentarily stunned as she said, "What did you gain from your deep meditation? Don't tell me you've had another breakthrough, and you're already at rank 80. I will truly be ashamed if that's the case." Huo Yuhao shook his head and said, "Of course not. Improving soul power requires continual accumulation. Even though I accumulate soul power relatively quickly, I can't reach rank 80 so fast. I still need some time." Nan Qiuqiu stared at him suspiciously. Back in the Earth Dragon sect, my seniors all start shaking their heads when they talk about reaching rank 80 after breaking through rank 70, as if reaching rank 80 is very difficult. Why do you sound like your success will come naturally? Huo Yuhao stared back at her exasperatedly. With your talent, you will realize my words stand true when you reach my cultivation rank. However, Qiuqiu, I have to remind you that you have to pay attention to your spiritual power. When your strength reaches a certain standard in the future, spiritual power will be extremely important if you want to continue improving. Your strength will halt if you don't have sufficient spiritual power, and you will find it very difficult to continue breaking through. This was Huo Yuhao's greatest takeaway after completing his soul core. His tremendous spiritual power made up for his insufficient soul power. Furthermore, the greatest benefit of having formidable spiritual power was towards the soul core's stability. Huo Yuhao was just a soul sage. Even though he had twin martial souls and was stronger than normal soul sages, he was still a soul sage in the end. But his spiritual power far exceeded his soul power, and under such circumstances, his ability to control his soul power was far stronger than other soul masters. This was how he managed to unexpectedly create his soul core this time. Huo Yuhao understood very well that he would need even more spiritual power when he fused with his second soul core. Any soul master who wanted to fuse with their soul cores would need spiritual power as a shield to support them, and thus spiritual power was the most crucial component to his future advancements. Why couldn't Elder Xian fuse with his second soul core to become a true ultimate Doluo? A large part of that lay in his lack of spiritual power, in addition to his lack of opportunity and luck. Every attempt ended in complete failure, and at his level, he had to readjust himself for a long time after every failure before he could try again. His confidence would also be affected after experimenting too many times without success, and that was a very terrifying thing for soul masters. Nan Qiuqiu stared at Huo Yuhao's serious look and mumbled, "How do I train my spiritual power? I'm not a spiritual type soul master. I can't just try and control my soul power futilely." Huo Yuhao smiled and said, "You can't take shortcuts in cultivation. Actually, there are some methods that you can try to raise your spiritual power." Nan Qiuqiu's eyes glowed. What methods? She was very interested about becoming stronger, and this was especially so in a place like the Tang sect. The Tang sect was full of elites, and anyone could be left behind. Huo Yuhao said, "For instance, like this." He stared at Nan Qiuqiu, and his eyes suddenly became deep and profound. Nan Qiuqiu felt as if there were a black maelstrom in each of his eyes, and she could feel an indescribable and terrifying pressure emanating from his body that locked her body down in an instant. She could feel a tremble that came from her own spirit, and she was terrified as she subconsciously gathered her soul power to resist that pressure. However, she quickly realized that her attempt was futile, because that pressure didn't come from soul power at all, it was pure spiritual power. Furthermore, that spiritual pressure was so strong that she couldn't even speak. Her flying-type soul tool became unstable as well, and she teetered in mid-air, and seemed like she was going to plummet. The pressure was suddenly lifted, and Nan Qiuqiu felt as if an enormous mountain had been lifted from her body. She panted in deep breaths, as she tried her best to control her flying-type soul tool. She glared at Huo Yuhao and said, "Are you crazy? Are you trying to kill me?" Huo Yuhao smiled and said, "This is the most effective method to train your spiritual power. If, at any moment, you can successfully resist my spiritual pressure, then your own will have reached a certain standard. Such training like this is very hard to come by. Didn't you feel like you were very bored along the way? Then I will take this chance to help you. We're not in a hurry anyway." "I don't." She couldn't even say "want" when the enormous spiritual pressure that had just disappeared descended onto her once more. Even though Nan Qiuqiu was a little more prepared than before, she was caught still off guard in front of Huo Yuhao's formidable soul power. This time, she was so badly beaten that she plummeted straight towards the ground. Huo Yuhao grabbed Nan Qiuqiu at an appropriate time in mid-air, and made sure that she wouldn't fall to her death. He waited for her to regain control of her body and for her to stabilize herself before the spiritual pressure came back. "I'm not fighting back anymore. Throw me to my death if you dare." Nan Qiuqiu was furious after this repeated itself a few more times. She felt extremely fatigued after those episodes of immense spiritual pressure. She didn't even bother to fly as she just allowed herself to drop down. Huo Yuhao had no choice but to catch her and land on the ground. Nan Qiuqiu kicked toward Huo Yuhao as they dropped to the ground. Huo Yuhao dodged lightly towards the side and said, "I'm doing this for your own good, Qiuqiu. PSH. You're trying to take this opportunity to get back at me. Nan Qiuqiu glared at Huo Yuhao with an indignant look on her face. Huo Yuhao frowned slightly and said, "Looks like I was wrong about you." Nan Qiuqiu was momentarily stunned. "Wrong about me? What are you wrong about me?" Huo Yuhao continued, "I have always believed you were a very strong lady. If others can't bear this method of training spiritual power, I'm sure you can. This is very beneficial for you becoming a titled Doluo in the future. I didn't expect you not to be able to take it after these few times. You're no different from a typical little girl. Forget it, I won't give you any more pressure. Meditate and rest up, and once you've rested up, we shall hurry towards the Earth Dragon sect." He gave her a disappointed expression as he spoke and turned his head to one side. Nan Qiuqiu frowned as his eyebrows went almost vertical. "Who says I can't take it? I can take it. But you're so evil. Are you targeting me deliberately?" Huo Yuhao snapped back. "I'm not so frivolous. I wouldn't be willing even if someone else begged me." Nan Qiuqiu grunted and said, "All right, then let me recover. Don't think you can overcome me when I'm prepared." Huo Yuhao twitched his lips and said, "Prove it." Nan Qiuqiu crossed her legs and began to recover with a competitive heart. Huo Yuhao smiled faintly as he watched her enter meditation. Provoking this girl is the way to go. She'll probably be tricked even if she knows I'm trying to bait her. The Earth Dragon sect could be said to have taken out their most important belongings so that they could establish close cooperation with the Tang sect. Bei Bei had told Huo Yuhao privately that the Tang sect had to find some way to repay them if possible. The Earth Dragon sect wasn't considered a top-tier sect amongst the sects on the continent, but they were still considered a very old and powerful sect. The Earth Dragon sect had provided much help to the Tang sect in terms of resources. Furthermore, with Nan Qiuqiu's support, the Tang sect's middle to high-level strength had been bolstered. The Earth Dragon sect's several hundred disciples still belonged to the Earth Dragon sect in name, but Nan Qiuqiu had already expressed generously that the Earth Dragon sect would fully support the Tang sect if anything happened. Of course, the Tang sect reciprocated the Earth Dragon sect's sincerity. Almost a third of the Earth Dragon sect's disciples had successfully fused with spirits, which was a very laudable accomplishment amongst the sects. The other sects all looked on with watering mouths, except they didn't understand the Tang sect like Nan Qiuqiu did, and they were just a little hesitant for the moment. Huo Yuhao listened to Nan Qiuqiu as she introduced her sect's secret grounds. He understood that even though Nan Qiuqiu and Nan Qiuqiu spoke of this as a gift to the Tang sect, this was equivalent to a gift for him. If there really was a rare ice-type metal inside, then that would be extremely useful for him. He could possibly fix the problem of channeling soul power around his human-shaped soul tool. Human-shaped soul tools didn't present any problems for the average soul master as long as their rare metals, jewels, and formation arrays were used appropriately. However, he had an ultimate martial soul, and typical rare metals couldn't bear his ultimate ice once he used it. Even if those rare metals had enough resistance, they didn't provide any amplification effects. Instead, those rare metals could hinder him instead. Huo Yuhao didn't want to owe too many favors, and this was especially so when he knew of Nan Qiuqiu's feelings toward him. Therefore, he wanted to take this opportunity to help her. Nan Qiuqiu's recovery speed was considerably fast, and she leapt to her feet energetically after an hour. "Are you ready? You can't say I'm ambushing you this time." Huo Yuhao placed his hands behind his back and stared at Nan Qiuqiu amusedly. Nan Qiuqiu couldn't stand his mocking smile. She said proudly, "Come. Be careful." Huo Yuhao warned her as his eyes suddenly became extremely deep and profound. This time, his spiritual power was very gentle as it pressed against Nan Qiuqiu. Nan Qiuqiu sensed that spiritual pressure, and she immediately concentrated to face it. She felt as if this pressure wasn't that powerful after a few moments, and a proud look immediately appeared on her face. She grunted and said, "I knew it. I was a little panicky in the sky. Otherwise, your spiritual power would have been useless against me, unless you used soul skills." Huo Yuhao smiled plainly and said, "Pay attention." His spiritual pressure gradually began to increase as his voice dropped. Nan Qiuqiu was tough in her words, but she knew the gap between Huo Yuhao and herself. Her expression froze as she gathered her strength once more to fend off Huo Yuhao without quarter. Huo Yuhao's spiritual pressure started to increase bit by bit. This level of increase was small, but it was still happening continuously. Every increase gave Nan Qiuqiu a little more pressure. Beads of sweat began to appear on her forehead, and her face turned a little rosy as her mouth opened slightly. A faint aroma wafted from her body, because she was sweating. Huo Yuhao was just standing there. He didn't even use his eyes to look at her as the pressure unleashed from his body continued to strengthen. Nan Qiuqiu gradually began to see hallucinations appear in front of her eyes as her breathing became very labored. She felt as if there were an enormous and formless mountain that was weighing down on her soul. No, I need to hold on. I can't let this fellow look down on me. She gritted her teeth before she suddenly shouted to boost her own form as a layer of pinkish light emanated from her body. That was her rouge dragon. Her martial soul emerged automatically under Huo Yuhao's formidable spiritual pressure. A pinkish diamond-shaped crystal instantly appeared on Nan Qiuqiu's forehead as her martial soul appeared. She clearly felt a lift in the pressure as the spiritual power inside her spiritual sea fused with her martial soul and resisted Huo Yuhao's pressure more effectively. Unfortunately, she couldn't even catch a breather as Huo Yuhao's spiritual pressure suddenly increased. That tremendous pressure made her body tremble as the pinkish light around her shone brilliantly. She couldn't help but feel a chill run down her spine. Has this guy's spiritual power really become this powerful? Nan Qiuqiu was very clear that Huo Yuhao hadn't yet released his martial soul. This meant that he was pressuring her with pure spiritual power, without any amplification from his spirit eyes. However, Nan Qiuqiu had unleashed her martial soul. No matter what, I'm still a soul emperor. Am I about to crumble against his spiritual pressure? Huo Yuhao still wasn't looking at her as the spiritual pressure increased continuously. Pinkish dragon scales emerged over Nan Qiuqiu's body. Her face and eventually her entire body was covered by dragon scales, but these dragon scales couldn't defend her against Huo Yuhao's spiritual pressure. Her body started to quiver and sway, and she gritted her teeth as she clenched her fists tightly. However, she was starting to break apart against the tremendous spiritual pressure. No, I can hold on. Nan Qiuqiu's stubbornness acted up. Just as Huo Yuhao thought, provoking this unbending girl was always the simplest and most effective method. Time continued to pass as Huo Yuhao's spiritual power continued to increase. Even he was a little surprised in this moment, as he hadn't expected her to be able to resist his pressure for so long. An hour had passed, while he had already unleashed 40% of what he could release. This 40% couldn't be underestimated. This amount was equivalent to the spiritual pressure that an 8-ringed soul doluo could unleash. Ever since Huo Yuhao completed his fusion with his soul core, his spiritual power's overall volume could be compared to that of a transcendent doluo, while his recovery speed and effectiveness followed in tandem. It was already quite impressive that Nan Qiuqiu could withstand 40% of his spiritual pressure. A thread of blood began to appear at the corner of Nan Qiuqiu's mouth. Her eyes and pupils became a little slack, but her unbending will kept her on her feet. Huo Yuhao knew that it was almost time. If he went any further, he would hurt her. He didn't immediately remove his spiritual pressure. That wouldn't be good for Nan Qiuqiu. Instead, he slowly lowered the pressure and let her gradually adapt to it. As the pressure decreased, Nan Qiuqiu's spiritual state of mind also started to weaken. Finally, she collapsed to the ground after Huo Yuhao removed all the pressure. Huo Yuhao came to her side. He lifted his hand and rubbed the perspiration off his forehead. While he only let out at most 40% of his spiritual power, he was carefully controlling it throughout this 1 hour. He had to get close to Nan Qiuqiu's limit without hurting her, which was sort of a test of his control. If this was before he had formed his soul core, he wouldn't have been able to do it. He squatted down beside Nan Qiuqiu and placed his hand on her brow. After sensing for a brief moment, he was sure that her spiritual sea was undamaged. It was just that she had been overly drained. After this, he nodded satisfactorily. The method of using spiritual pressure to strengthen someone else's spiritual power was built on the premise that the person possessed immense spiritual power in the first place. Otherwise, the other party might be critically hurt if things went wrong. However, this was undoubtedly the best method, and it was the most effective on the first try. Huo Yuhao estimated that Nan Qiuqiu's spiritual power would experience a significant increase after this experience. However, she was overly drained and wouldn't wake up anytime soon. Huo Yuhao spontaneously opened his spectral demiplane and placed her inside. After unleashing some enchantments, he chased away some specters and protected her inside the demiplane. At the same time, he left behind a streak of his spirit to protect her inside the demiplane. The moment she woke up, he would be aware of it. After finishing all that, he stood up before continuing his journey. Without Nan Qiuqiu slowing him down, Huo Yuhao was as quick as lightning as he flew in the air. This time, he didn't use any flying-type soul tools. He relied on his soul power to fly. As he flew, Huo Yuhao sensed that his soul power was slowly being drained. After forming his soul core, he hadn't had time to carefully test it yet. He had only briefly tested it in the Sea God's Pavilion. After the fusion, his soul power had actually jumped 2 ranks. He was now at rank 76. Such an increase left him close to rank 80. In just a year, he had managed to improve by leaps and bounds. However, Huo Yuhao wasn't satisfied with his current cultivation. The war might carry on at any time. A 7-ringed soul sage was considered pretty high-ranked, but he wouldn't be of much help if he wanted to affect the situation at the highest tier. He needed greater strength. Due to the rank of his soul power was obviously being drained at a slower speed. Huo Yuhao was more astonished with the recovery speed of his soul power. After more than 10% of his soul power had been drained, he didn't need to deliberately do anything. On his forehead, the black whirlpool that belonged to a different dimension naturally opened. There was boundless darkness inside this whirlpool. A strong suction force instantaneously appeared and sucked all the origin energy in the air to replenish Huo Yuhao's body. He recovered as quickly as he was drained. It was as if he wasn't affected at all. No wonder it was only a titled Doluo that could possess a soul core. Given this recovery speed, he wasn't afraid of being drained in the process of flying. Furthermore, Huo Yuhao was stunned to discover that his soul core didn't just replenish his soul power. It also replenished his spiritual power. To help Nan Qiuqiu earlier, his spiritual sea was revolving in a weird trajectory, but his spiritual power was now recovering too. Simply put, this soul core was like another Huo Yuhao in a different dimension. In this world, Huo Yuhao might be flying. However, he was resting and cultivating in the other dimension. This feeling wasn't just new, it was fantastic too. Huo Yuhao understood that his cultivation speed had doubled at the very least after obtaining this soul core. Within a year or 2, he could become a soul Doluo. Right now, he was just 20 years old. As he flew and sensed the changes in his soul core, Huo Yuhao's flying speed kept on increasing. He was like a beam of flowing light in the air. More magically, this beam of flowing light was slowly dimming as it flew. It was as if it were combining with heaven and earth. If Elder Mu could be by Huo Yuhao's side right now, he would be shocked. He would also tell Huo Yuhao that this was the unity of heaven and man. Even transcendent Doluo might not reach such a realm. After reaching such a realm, not only would one's life energy decrease at a slower speed, but his affinity with the origin energy of heaven and earth would also increase. During the process of cultivation and recovery, such a soul master would do better than other soul masters of the same cultivation. In addition, such a soul master would also be better at concealing himself. Huo Yuhao was delayed because he was helping Nan Qiuqiu earlier, but he soon caught up with his astonishing speed. In the evening, he could already see the outline of Dragon City. Dragon City was considered a huge city in the Heavenly Soul Empire, located in its northeast region. Its temperature was comparatively lower than the other regions. Moving north from Dragon City, Huo Yuhao could reach the extreme north in less than 4 hours. He could reach the core of the extreme north in at most 8 hours. This clearly showed how low the temperature was in Dragon City. Huo Yuhao could only see ice and snow all around. In fact, he clearly knew why the Sun-Moon Empire chose to occupy more than 2/3 of the territory of the Heavenly Soul Empire. They wanted to continue expanding their territory starting from the north. One reason was that it was very difficult for ordinary soldiers to resist the cold in the north. This was even more advantageous for their soul engineer legions. Even the Dou-Ling Empire wasn't able to provide stronger support. Another reason was naturally because of Shrek Academy. If the Sun-Moon Empire attacked the south first, they were very likely to face the combined forces of the Star Luo Empire, Heavenly Soul Empire, Dou-Ling Empire, and Shrek Academy. Just like Huo Yuhao's second plan, such a situation would lead to a final showdown between the Sun-Moon Empire and the rest of the other empires and Shrek Academy. Without the Star Luo Empire's attack on the Sun-Moon Empire's territories, the Sun-Moon Empire might perhaps still choose a final showdown. With the Holy Ghost Church to support them, a few Soul Engineer legions and 2 ultimate Doluo, they were confident of winning. However, if the Sun-Moon Empire's territories were attacked, they would be greatly threatened, and would have no choice but to send troops to protect their own territories. Under such a condition, the situation at the front lines was bound to be less intense. Invading from the north could at least help them avoid the Star Luo Empire and Shrek Academy. The remaining troops of the Dou-Ling and Heavenly Soul Empires would at most delay them, but not stop them. Evidently, attacking from the north instead of the south was more advantageous. At the same time, the Sun-Moon Empire needed some buffer time. Although the Heavenly Soul Empire wasn't as huge as the Star Luo Empire, it was still much bigger than the Dou-Ling Empire. Compared to the Sun-Moon Empire, it was still 2/3 as large. After occupying the Heavenly Soul Empire, the Sun-Moon Empire still needed time to pacify the citizens and strengthen their rule. This was why the Sun-Moon Empire had toned down over the past month or so. An invasion couldn't be pulled off so easily. This was because it wasn't just an invasion. It was an annexation. The Sun-Moon Empire wanted to expand its territory. It was Huo Yuhao's first time here in Dragon City. Now that the first city in the north of the Heavenly Soul Empire was already occupied, how could one not feel hopeless? The Heavenly Dragon and Earth Dragon sects were the 2 most representative sects of Dragon City. However, they were still lacking compared to the Sun-Moon Empire. The Earth Dragon sect saw it coming, and had already moved more than half of their resources and disciples to Shrek City under Nan Shueishue's charge. They only had some resources left over, but they weren't greatly affected. The situation that the Heavenly Dragon sect was in right now was unknown. Huo Yuhao could still clearly remember how strong the captain of the Earth Dragon sect's team, Yu Qianlong, was during the Elite Continental Advanced Soul Master Academy Soul Dueling Tournament. His pure blue lightning tyrant dragon was extraordinary. Nan Shueishue had also mentioned that the Heavenly Dragon sect was stronger than the Earth Dragon sect, whose sect leader was a titled Doluo. Even though it wasn't as strong as the Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon sect in the past, it was still an elite sect. As he thought, Huo Yuhao was already getting closer and closer to Dragon City. He unleashed his spiritual power in the direction of Dragon City. Just as he had expected, there were already aerial surveillance soul tools over Dragon City. However, there were fewer aerial surveillance soul tools here compared to the Mingdo mountain range. After all, manufacturing aerial surveillance soul tools wasn't cheap. Unless they were used at particularly important places, there wouldn't be a congregation of them. At the same time, Huo Yuhao saw that there were no troops stationed outside the city. There were only some guards on the city wall. It seemed like the Sun-Moon Empire's defense of Dragon City wasn't very strong. Huo Yuhao found a small tree that could conceal him as he descended when he was around 8 kilometers from Dragon City. He revealed himself before walking towards the city. Nan Xiuqiu was still in a deep sleep. Huo Yuhao predicted that she would only awaken the next morning. This period of time was particularly important to her. One couldn't increase their spiritual power under normal conditions. This was why he decided to enter the city and find a place to stay first before going to the Earth Dragon sect after Nan Xiuqiu was awake. He would need some time to walk 8 kilometers. However, he wasn't in a rush and walked slowly. There wasn't much security outside the city, and he was only briefly checked before he was allowed to enter. This video will end here.